One. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited and delighted today. We have Dr. Paul. For everyone in Dr. Paul's community, my name is Jared, Transformational Coaching. From everyone from the Transformational Coaching community, this is Dr. Paul. He's the author of Pathological Positivity and Live Your Purpose TV. He's been doing this work for quite some time. He's a positive psychologist and has worked with companies, with individuals over the years. Dr. Paul, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to get into today's conversation.
I'm happy to be with you again, Jared. We always have fun when we chat.
Yeah, it is always a good time. So I wanted to go into building a practice today. I think this is something, given what's going on with COVID, a lot of people have just gone online, but I also speak with a lot of therapists and psychologists who are working in the system, but who are wanting to go from working in a physical location to working online. And I see this shift happening everywhere. People are wanting to just be able to work from home. I mean, obviously, this is what you and I do at times, and other times we get called out. So I just wanted to go into really what was the first steps or the impetus for you to start up your own practice?
Well, there's different elements of that, Jared, because when you say practice, I go clear back to my beginnings when I came out of shrink school and I set up a private outpatient psychotherapy practice. I've always had my own practice. So I didn't, go in with some big conglomerate or a hospital or something. I did my own thing, always been entrepreneurial that way. But I started out in traditional psychotherapy. And the shtick there is that you bring people in, you give them a diagnosis, you build their insurance company, work them through their treatment plan.
Right.
And I could mention all the administrative stuff too. I had a staff of about 8 people, me and another psychologist, just to handle the insurance billing. And to work through all the paperwork and the pre-authorizations and
it's a lot of different stuff,
right? And so I made a shift about 15 years ago over to positive psychology, and this is where my practice changed from traditional psychotherapy to positive psychology-based life, personal, and family development coaching. And there's a difference. If you think of your mental health on a spectrum, right? On the left end of that is the sick end. So that's where we have diagnosis, pathology, treatment. I'm really more passionate about the other end.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And that's what I think like the performance, the development, I mean, that's what I love about positive psychology. When you look at the work of, Maslow and all the other positive psychologists, they were like, well, no one's really thinking about human well-being. Like, what about having a really awesome created life? What does that actually look like? And the orientation was just totally different.
Well, traditional psychology, it came from kind of an offshoot of the medical industry. And so the mindset there, the thinking was diagnosis, pathology, treatment. And I'm not sure that's the best fit for psychology. It works okay in some settings, but if you go back to that spectrum, what is it that's over here at the positive end of it?
Right.
To understand that, if we go to the middle first, that's health.
Right.
Okay, meaning not sick. You'd think health is the opposite of sick, right? But it just means not sick. You could be sick in bed with a fever, throwing up. There comes a time you can get out of bed. You're not sick.
Right. That
doesn't mean you're truly fit, thriving, prospering.
Yeah.
That's over here.
Yeah.
So I moved my practice from this end of the spectrum, where I hung out for maybe 12, 13 years, over to this end. And Jared, there's overlap in the middle. Everybody's got issues.
Right.
Noticed?
Yeah. And I think that's important to recognize, because I mean, whenever people ask me about coaching, I pretty much just tell them, like, the orientation of therapy is the past. You're working with the past. There's pervasive problems throughout your past that you have to work with. Whereas coaching is more future oriented. It's like, well, how do you want to create life more empowered? How do you want to move things forward in a way that's thriving for you? And what does thriving even look like for you? How do you define that? And then obviously, as we're creating our life, we always go through times or we get pulled back one way or something like this. I mean, I see it all the time. I have one client who she was just getting caught up in her thoughts too much. She's a really successful person, but she's just getting caught up in her thoughts. And I was like, look, you're just getting caught up in your thoughts. You just need a gentle reminder that, you're not going crazy, or you're not, because she's building out a whole company culture. So she's questioning everything because she's doing a lot of great work in the world. And so I think it's really important as a coach, or, just as I see it as a transformational presence, to hold space for people's highest potential. Like that's what I really love about this work. I'm always looking at, what is this person's highest potential? How can I hold them in that space? And then when they temporarily have those moments of relapse, which we all do have at time to time, where you just pull her back. I just pull her back to the center. Oh no, we're right here. This is what we got going on. This is the best potential. This is your potential. I see it, and you're good. We can continue to live into that. And that's what every human being, I think, needs to thrive. I mean, when I look at human development, and from all the mentorships and the trainings I've done, and just the clients that I've coached over the years, I see that what human beings, it seems like they want in order to best thrive, is to know that someone believes in them, to know that someone can hold safe space for them to become their highest potential, without the same time, at the same time, not bludgeoning them over the head saying, this is how you do it. You have to do it this way. And,
Well, it's interesting, Jared, when you say the words highest potential, that's kind of, to me, like the horizon, or even a rainbow. It's something you can see out there in the distance, that, oh, I could be so much better. And then once you get there, guess what? You notice you're not there. This is bad. It's just something that we need to recognize, because there's always something we can do to improve.
Yeah.
And that's really good news, because what if there weren't?
Right. Yeah. And I'm curious, Dr. Paul, I mean, as it applies to just building a practice, do you see for yourself and the clients you've worked with for over the years, do you see a point where, like, let's say they have an income goal or a client goal or something like this, that they hit that, and then it takes time for that new, what I see is it almost takes time for that new reality to stabilize. Like, some people, they're like, yes, I want to access my full potential. Then, like you said, it's the horizon. They get to wherever they want to be in whatever goal that may look like. And then once they finally get there, it also takes, there has to be a stabilization that takes place as well too. Because sometimes I'll see people meet their goals, and then they'll think, I can't keep this. I can't keep it. And then I'll see like the self-sabotaging mechanism come out, where it's like, I'm just going to throw it all away because I don't know if I can maintain this. But my ego's in control. I don't want this, actually. I've done that before, and once I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I didn't even think I had that. And I saw it in other people as well. So I guess, how would you say, when someone's building up their practice, how would you say that they can best be aware of that mechanism that comes into place at every single new level? Because I think there is a stabilization that has to occur.
Yeah. Well, when you say stabilization, I'm thinking we gravitate toward whatever we're used to.
Right.
And we're used to whatever our training and teaching and education has programmed us to be used to. As you get used to something, it's no longer a stretch for you.
Right.
And I call this the decimal factor in my trainings, because you remember when $1 was a big deal?
Yeah.
I mean, when we're little kids, right? I had kids that lived next door who had chickens in the backyard, and they used to sell us eggs, and they'd come over and we'd pay them for the eggs. And I remember one day, they were about 6 years old at the time, these two little twins, and they came over and they presented me with the eggs, and I gave them $1 and a handful of change.
Mm-hmm.
And they ran home excited and showed mom, Mom, look, he gave us money, showing her the coins and this, whatever this was, the dollar bill. And there comes a time when a dollar, it's like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money.
Right.
Remember when you graduated to 10?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe back in elementary school or something, you're like, oh, a dollar's not a big deal anymore, but 10 is. And then do you remember graduating to 100?
Right. Right.
And some people, kind of plateau out right there.
Right.
1,000, then you go to 10,000. And it's the decimal factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you get used to this, it's not a big deal anymore.
Right.
And so you talk about stabilizing there, you get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And after you get used to it, it's not a big deal anymore. And you get to go to the next level. So I've found in my own career, Jared, and I've seen this in dozens, hundreds of people that I've coached, where I call it a ceiling of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where your current set of skills and resources and talent and experience and all of that allows you to perform somewhere below that ceiling. And at some point you start to bump up against that ceiling of complexity. And I know I'm getting there when my calendar gets tight,
mm-hmm.
and when I'm feeling a little stressed or overwhelmed,
mm-hmm.
because I've increased my activity and my production to that point, I'm bumping up against the ceiling of complexity now.
Okay.
And when we hit that ceiling, we got two choices. We either get to break through that ceiling of complexity into a whole new level that we can get used to,
mm-hmm.
or we retreat into security.
Into what we know.
We're used to.
Right.
And it's a good sign to me. I'm hitting one again, Jared. Because I've been building my membership site, and we've hit a certain point where it's like, oh, I can't expand my calendar. I can't duplicate me.
Yep.
I got to break through the ceiling of complexity to get to my next level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the feelings that I coach entrepreneurs about all the time. When you're feeling overwhelmed, it's not a bad sign.
Right.
It probably means you're bumping up against that ceiling of complexity.
Right.
Clear, you got two choices: break through that into a new level of freedom, or retreat into security.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like I see this all the time at upper limits. I remember I had one client where she got two really good business deals that she wanted. She finally got a relationship in her life that person would stick around even when she was in her worst and her shadow, which she had never had before. And she called me up in a panic, was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. I said, well, what's actually the matter? And she's like, nothing. And it was like, I could see that she just had never had that experience before of getting actually what she wanted. And it all happened really quickly. And I think it's important to be aware of those during the process, because people are going to hit them. It's inevitable. And yeah.
If you're growing, you're going to feel stretched.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're comfortable, that may not be a good sign. I mentioned security. You can retreat into what you're secure with, but think about that word security.
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity when I was a graduate student to do a rotation at the state prison, and I worked in a medium security facility. Where would you be if you achieved maximum security? Right? Security is not freedom.
Right.
It's on the other side of that barrier, that ceiling of complexity. That's where you're going to find the freedom and new possibilities. You will not reach your highest potential. Okay? Right. You won't.
Yeah.
Because once you break through, you get used to that, and then you see that there's more.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I call it, that there's I don't know if you've seen this diagram, but I found it really useful. There's the comfort zone, the uncomfort zone, and then like the panic zone. And whenever I'm working with a client, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, with this is definitely their uncomfort zone. Are they in their panic zone? Because sometimes I've seen people where they go too far too quickly. And
Yeah.
then I'll see them, they'll retreat back to their comfort zone and what they know. I know I've done that, twice in my career where I'd be like, whoa, too much. Like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And I think that's like the real value of a coach is they hold us in a space where even if we're out of our element completely, we've already gone further and we can hold them in that gentle space and say, hey, you're good. Like, I got you. I know this is new territory. I know it feels like you're walking on eggshells. I know it feels like everything's about to fall at one point and you can't hold, but that's normal. That's good. It's foreign territory. It's going to feel that way. You're going to feel more alive and in the senses, but at the same time, nervous and a little scared.
You know what? Everything you want that you don't currently have is outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that simple. It really is. Yeah.
Right. So it's not a bad sign when you start to feel that stretch. In fact, it probably means we're getting into that growth zone.
Mm.
And you're right, Jared. If you try to jump too far, you'll probably get in over your head.
Mm-hmm.
You'll probably start to panic. I know when I'm training coaches, we step them into it. They get to do some practice and we work on this little project that gets them a little step closer to what they've envisioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already mentioned this a couple of times about that full potential.
Mm-hmm.
What is that even? I mean, we can imagine stretching ourselves to a place that we aren't currently. Well, once you get there, you get used to that.
Right. I love it when you were talking about this ceiling of complexity, Dr. Paul. I love one of the comments that you made. You were saying that it's a whole nother ceiling, like a whole nother playing field. So I guess what for you when you're building up a practice, how do you know that you're in a whole new playing field, and what would you suggest someone does once they're in that whole new playing field?
The first thing that popped into my head, have fun.
Yeah.
If we are not enjoying what we're doing, then why are we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's other purposes to it. Okay, but have some fun. This helps to bring down the anxiety levels. Okay?
Right.
You're experiencing something new. You're on a new playing field. You're in a new game now. And nobody rocks a new game the first time they play it.
Right. Yeah.
So enjoy it, learn the game, pay attention to people who are already on that playing field who are playing it well, because you can always benefit from their experience.
Right.
You don't always have to learn things the hard way. I mean, just pay attention, watch what's happening and enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. That's the first thing that popped into my mind.
Yeah, it's funny. What I was talking about this with a client the other day, and I could see that she was really stressed about some new expansion. And the first thing I just said to her, I was like, "Look, it's completely normal. Like, what would just make this funner? Like, what would make this more enjoyable for your experience? Because that's another thing. If there's not some level of enjoyment and it's all in stress and anxiety, unless you're military trained, like I was years ago." You might a lot of people fall back, and it's not necessary. It's not needed. It's if you make it. I think gamification is what a lot of other consultants I've heard has called it. If you can make whatever it is that scares you a game, then you're increasing your chances of being successful at it and enjoy the process while you do it.
Right. It's kind of ridiculous sometimes, and we see this when we look back on our experience.
Mm-hmm.
We think about a time when we were paralyzed with fear or we were so worried, and then our greatest fears didn't even come close to playing out.
Right.
And we look back at it and say, well, what was I so worried about? And I think as we take ourselves less seriously, we're going to have a better experience in life. But like you said, it's going to increase our performance too. I'm remembering a colleague of mine who was giving tips on how to nail your job interview.
Mm-hmm.
And the tip that he gave was to have some food item hidden somewhere on your body.
How? I'm not drawing the connection.
Lunch meat on your shoulder. Waffle syrup in your shoe.
Just to make it more fun.
How do you take yourself too seriously when you've got some food item hidden in your undies? And it sounds ridiculous, but you know what the problem with that, Jared, is let's lighten up a little bit. We take life way too seriously, and then it becomes this competition. It's like, oh, Jared is totally rocking his practice, and I suck.
Right.
No, you don't. You're at different places. You got different stories.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of comparing our weaknesses to someone else's strengths, I mean, that's not fair.
Right. It never is.
But just see that you're learning things, you're making progress, you're taking incremental steps toward an upgrade. And if we don't hold ourselves to this impossible standard of, and maybe that's why I jumped on the idea of full potential. I don't think you can reach that because there's always more.
Right. It's always coming through. There's always just that next level, whatever that looks like.
So maybe we make it directional instead of a destination. I'm going that away.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
You can go toward the horizon. You can't go to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's direction, not destination. So if we think of our goals that way, then we can celebrate the journey and the progress we're making toward, not to, some unreachable standard.
I love that. Yeah, because what I've seen just from my own life at times, you know, I talk about this, I guess, in the way of process goals and like goal-oriented goals. It's like if you have process goals, you're much more, your motivational scheme is very different than just having objective goal-oriented goals. Like if you have just objective goal-oriented goals, you're not guaranteed to meet them because there's so many other influencing factors that might be out of your control that you might not even take into account of. Whereas process-oriented goals, you're just looking at, okay, I'm just going to show up, do what I need to do, and then see what happens from there. And if we're always setting those process goals, the motivation is definitely different. Like I was speaking about this with one client recently. She said, okay, well, I want to bring like X amount of people into my practice. And I said, look, you don't necessarily have control of that, but what actions can we list to ensure that you're going to get really close to that or meet that or surpass that? And then we'll just take action around those. And that's such a more empowering way to look at your goals or to look at your journey, because if you get caught up in the destination, which is always changing because that's just the nature of growth, or you get caught up in the end outcome, well, that's a never-ending rat race or a hamster wheel.
Well, you're identifying a really important psychological principle, because if it's destination-oriented, if it's some kind of achievement-oriented goal, then we get into a trap of thinking that I'll be happy when.
Right. Yeah.
This is always a trap. And the reality is you reach that destination or that achievement that you set, and then it's like, now what?
What next? Yeah.
Do you remember there was a show called Finding Nemo? Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
Pixar. Anyway, at the end of the show, the fish the whole time are planning their escape, right? From the dentist's office aquarium. They're planning their escape. They finally get out and they're in these bags, these sealed plastic bags, and they roll across the road and they're in the harbor and they're floating around in these plastic bags and they're like, now what? Right? I mean, they come, we'll be happy when we escape. And then it's like, now they're sealed up in these bags in the ocean. And it's just kind of funny, but how often do we do that?
Yeah.
It's like, I remember when I first got to hold my physical book in my hands, after working on it for 3.5 years, and I'll be happy when that book's published, right? And it came in the mail and I opened it up and I held it in my hands and I felt this little rush. And it ended.
It disappeared.
It's like, okay, I guess I'll go mow the lawn. What do you do next? See, so I love what you said, Jared, about this is a process.
Yeah.
Right? Engage in the process. We've known forever that happiness and success are correlated. Mm-hmm. There is a statistical correlation in all the studies we've done between happiness and success, but we made an error thinking that therefore success leads to happiness.
Okay. Yeah.
That's an error in thinking. We got it backwards. It's the other way around. Happiness leads to success.
Yeah.
In every measurable aspect of success, including finances, relationships, everything that we've looked at. It's the other way around. Okay. Happiness leads to success. So what we do is we learn how to operate the equipment of our own mind. That's my specialty. That's what I help people with. Mm-hmm. And the models of positivity that I've put together. You figure out, you learn how to operate the equipment of your own mind in a way that allows you to remain happy no matter what. And when I say happy, I don't mean that you're never sad, because I think true happiness includes a whole range of feelings.
Yeah.
But we're getting into a whole other conversation there. The point is, when you're happy, you're more likely to accomplish or achieve everything else that you think would bring you happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I'm actually really, I'm glad we're going down this topic, because I think this is important to building anything long lasting, especially a practice. What I see sometimes is people will get caught up in, oh, I'm not feeling good in this moment, so therefore I'm not happy. And then they'll make judgments about who they think they are, like long-term judgments, like, oh, I'm having a bad moment, or I'm having a moment where things are like I might have a feeling, like some feeling that isn't happy. And I always look at it, it's like, well, that's just a temporary emotion. It's like an emotional fit. Like, just because you sneeze doesn't mean you're sick. Just because you cough doesn't mean you're sick either. I mean, sometimes it can, but sometimes it doesn't. And so I see this all the time with people I mean, I see it everywhere. They'll have one moment of an emotion or something like this that they'll judge then and make it a bigger thing or idea than it actually is. And it's like, no, you're fine. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, okay, yeah, you had a sad moment, or you had, an angry moment. Like, that's just being human, but that doesn't mean you're not happy or you're not fulfilled. You don't have to take that one small little emotional human experience that you had in your day and make a huge conclusion about who you are and your permanent state, because there isn't a permanent state. It's just
Here's something really profound. Okay, everybody put this in your notes. Feelings change.
Yeah.
No, we don't realize that in the thick of it. It's like, oh, I'm depressed. And we think that that's our identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's an experience. Okay. Humans have a full range of experience. Feelings change.
Yeah.
When we try to resist our feelings or try to change our feelings or interpret way too much from our feelings, like you were describing, then they become more powerful somehow in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I look at it as almost the identification. Like, if we, like you said, if we make it something bigger than it actually is, then suddenly it does become a crisis. I mean, for us in our minds, but it's not actually one. And this is where I see this all the time in people's lives, where they'll see something on the news, or they'll see something on the, oh man, like, they'll get caught up in their own thing. I have compassion for them, but at the same time, I challenge them as well to just see it for what it is. It's like, oh, you're just having a temporary moment where you're concerned and you're worried, but like, it's just a feeling. It's going to pass. But I totally agree. When you get caught up in it and you think that, it's going to be there forever, because even that's the thing about feelings. Like, in the moment, it can feel like that feeling is going to be there forever. Like,
Right.
but it's just, it's going to pass. It's just a temporary, you'll move through it. And I think individuals would live, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I do this work. I'm sure it contributes to why you do this work. I think people would live so much more fulfilling and satisfying lives if they could see that. It's just like, oh, you don't need to, this temporary feeling you're having right now, you don't have to make it about some long-standing idea of your identity or some long-standing idea about life or some long-standing, it's just, look, it's just a feeling. That's all it is. And you're moving through it. And on the other side of it is something much more, it's something better. It's something more, like I remember I was talking with my little sister over the summer, and she had one of those moments. And I just told her, I said, I'm with you, I'm here, but I just want you to know that about, I'll give you a call in 8 hours and we'll see how you're thinking and feeling then. But I stuck with her for that moment where she had that. And then we talked 8 hours later and she said, yeah, it's not nearly that much of a big deal. And I said, and look at that. Like, you can look back at what you were thinking and feeling in that moment, and then look where you are now 8 hours later. It wasn't actually a big deal, but in that moment, it felt like a big deal. And I think that's such an important reminder when we're creating anything in life, because you're going to have those emotional fits, or it's just a part of it. It's just a part of it. But I really love your view of positivity and just saying, like, look, you just continue forward. Like, there's always a whole range of feelings, but you just continue forward. You don't make it such a big deal, because it really isn't.
We've got a precedent for this, that if we pay attention to this symbol that shows up in our world, it's going to help us with our emotional health. And the symbol is the weather. Have you noticed that storms always pass?
Yeah. And they always come.
They always come.
Yeah.
It's the way it should be. And this is how humans are too. You're supposed to feel stuff. So when you feel it, first of all, don't slip into the error of thinking that this defines you or that this is permanent, because neither of those things are true.
Right. Well, I love this, because this is where we get into the orientation, I think, too, of practice as well. Like, I think sometimes, and there's no judgments around this, but I'm not bagging on anyone, but I think the orientation of sometimes of the traditional therapeutic model that's kind of what it looks like. It's saying, oh, this is a permanent thing that you might have to deal with. But if you take it to the other spectrum, it's like, well, no, it's just it's a temporary state. And if you move through this temporary state, you're on the other side of it. It's a storm. It's not. But if you choose to go back to the storm and live in the storm, well, then of course you're creating it to be a state, if you continue to focus on it and think about it in that way.
It's like you're stirring up the storm.
Right.
One of the techniques that we can apply here is to simply observe our feelings. If you can back off from it as if you were over here observing it, okay? Just watch it. Don't argue with it. Don't fight with it. Don't resist it. Don't try to change it. Just feel what you're feeling and observe it. And here's what's going to happen, because feelings change, just like storms pass. You're going to watch that feeling for a bit. Be curious about it. Just kind of watch it. And it's going to change. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I think the more people or individuals focus on that, the more resilient they become, the more naturally forward thinking, forward creating they become. Dr. Paul, thanks so much for taking some time out to be here. Do you want to go into some audience questions? I know we got a lot of questions over here that I can bring up.
Absolutely. Let's bring it up.
All right, so let's go. I think there was a question earlier from Latha Badari. Let's see. I want to bring up, and guys, if you have any other questions right now, here we go. Feel free to put them up there.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
She says, I have a question for you, doctor. What is the message for those who are constant fear about this pandemic? How will they live normal and live in the present?
The first thing that I want to say about that is that it's totally an option to live in fear.
Yes. Yep. Choice.
Now, I say it that way, and that irritates and annoys some people because they're like, well, I have a choice?
Yeah.
Well, see, being afraid doesn't change what it is.
Mm.
It simply is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I get this call all the time. In fact, you know what, Jared? I'm doing a free web class next week about how to stay positive during the pandemic.
It's perfect. There you go.
Just
Guys.
just jot this down: positivitywebclass.com.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. Positivitywebclass.com. Here's the context. And people call me all the time, Doc, how do we stay positive in this pandemic? How do we stay positive during such challenging times? And I'm like, okay, first of all, notice that you're calling it that.
Yeah.
Challenging times, really? Compared to what? I've got this book right here, Immaculée Ilibagiza.
Yeah.
She survived the Rwanda Holocaust, the genocide that occurred among her people. Over 1 million people killed in like 90 days. That's worse than Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Challenging times? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? Just notice that you're calling it that. See, this is part. I'm not here to tell people how to think. Right. I just want you to see that you are.
Right. I love that. That's a great way to look at it. And this is the most. I remember I did a webinar because this links to what you're sharing. I did a webinar back in October on breathing because people were feeling a lot of anxiety, and so I did a breathwork webinar because I have a background in that. And I went to house. Like this was October, so still during COVID. I went house to house in my area, literally door knocking, because I love doing door knocking as well too. I love door to door sales stuff. I don't know why. I like it all. I like anything that's pushing my limits in new ways. I had two people invited me into their home. 2 people during the pandemic. I think there's what we think about life and what we're told to think about life through media or through other things. And then there's actually what's really going on in life. And the two are very, very different. And I think that's what we need to remember is that whatever you think about life, yes, that there might be some elements that are true, but if you're getting caught up in fear or challenging or how that guy defined challenging times, it's like, well, if you choose to think about it that way and you believe that thought, then that's going to be your emotional experience. But if you just see it that it's just life happening and that you're a resilient, flexible, adaptable human being and you'll figure it out because you always have, you made it this far.
If you will consider that these are not challenging times, these are not easy times, these are not hard times, these are simply times.
Right. Yeah. I love that.
And it is what it is. Now, people throughout history have dealt with this or that or whatever. This just happens to be our current weather.
Yeah.
It's the weather report.
Right.
And I'm not saying that COVID-19 is insignificant. It is, in fact, the weather we have right now.
Right.
So let's deal with it in appropriate ways. And notice that our mind is labeling it, evaluating. I call this process evaluation in my positivity model. And that matters because how we judge what it is puts us in position now to move forward into the next mode, which is creation mode.
Yes. And like that. Yeah. I love that you said that. If we come at it, trying to do anything from a fear or anxiety stricken state, it just doesn't work.
Right.
It's way less effective. We're shaky. We don't perform nearly as well. And so I think like you said, I think it's important to call whatever's happening. It's just happening. Yes, there's true elements about it. Yes, there might be harder elements, harsher elements. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, whatever's here, I'm just going to, what's the emotional energy that I'm meeting it with? Because if you're meeting it from a place of fear, it's not gonna, it's like, I did 2 combat deployments, and we were always, one of the biggest things that we were always taught before we went into an area was, look, things are gonna go wrong. Things are going to go bad. It's like Murphy's Laws of Combat. I don't know have you ever heard of these? These are really cool. Murphy's Laws of Combat.
I can kind of imagine though.
Okay. So one of them is like, whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and the only way to solve it is to remain as calm as possible while everything's blowing up. like that was
Right.
that was literally the rule. And so like we would go in, like if we went into a certain area, I knew like, okay, we're briefed, some things are going to go horribly wrong and awry. I have my rule book, but I'm ready to throw my rule book out at any moment. And it's like that attitude and that approach is exactly what allows you to move through any time, whether it's challenging, whether it's good, however your mind wants to label it. It's just, okay, this is what's happening and this is how I'm going to deal with it.
And maybe as a final thought for this particular question, the storms will pass. The storms will pass. And then we're on to something else.
Yeah.
And whatever is next, we'll take that on then.
Yeah. Yeah.
It serves us well to take a position that allows us to handle whatever it is in the most productive ways. If a storm starts to gather and you realize that you left the windows open in your vehicle, you go out and close the windows.
Right.
You don't go out and shake your fist at the heavens. Don't start with me.
Right.
Storms just happen and storms pass. And this too will pass. There will be a time when we look at COVID-19. It'll be in the history books.
Yep. Yeah.
We'll read about it. Our kids, our grandkids will be like, wow, tell us about the great pandemic. And we're like, I was there. I mean, it's just, it's our particular story. And extreme does not mean extraordinary. So as intense as this might be, as extreme as our storm might be to us right now, it's not extraordinary, because people throughout history have dealt with whatever storms they've dealt with. So keep that in perspective.
Yeah.
And then there are ways to choose happiness, peace, and fear is an option too. Okay, so we're not here to tell you how to think. Realize that it's an option. Until you see it as a choice, it's not.
Yeah, beautiful. But you have to see it. That's the biggest thing, is you just have to see that it's an option. Yeah.
Right.
Last question here, Dr. Paul. We got Suzakin-san. How to change my bad behaviors in a short window of time?
Stop doing them.
That's it. So,
well, and I say that as if it's easy.
Right.
They aren't the same thing. What is it that you want to stop doing?
Yeah.
Stop doing that. Now, there are some things that we call addictions, or things that, strong habits that we become used to. Here's the thing. You can change your behavior. You can change your thoughts. It requires a choice first. The choice is necessary, but not sufficient. And a good example would be, I want to change my behavior to start playing the guitar. Okay, choose it, and then put in the work that is required to get there. The part a lot of people skip when they're trying to change their behavior is that they neglect their mental hygiene.
Yeah.
They're not taking care of the equipment that's going to allow them to do that change in the first place. So by mental hygiene, I'm talking about what are you doing on a daily basis to take care of your attitude, your mindset, your level of happiness or fear. If you pick one of those, work on something. Okay. And if you're trusting the mainstream media to take care of your mind, you're in big trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Not just mainstream, but social media too. The pandemic, for example, has brought about what I call a second pandemic of poisonous pessimism.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Fear, scarcity, paranoia, and it's killing people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we can only focus. I think this is the great internal locus of control conversation. You have what you can control, you have what you can't control, and then you have what is definitely not in your control. And if you focus on things that are definitely not in your control, you're naturally going to feel anxiety and fear because you can't control it. So it's like you only focus on the things that you can control. And I always use the example of Nelson Mandela. I find him so inspirational. Like, that guy was in prison for decades. And when you read his biography, he just focused on what he could control. And that was bending the will of the guards. And so he slowly befriended the guards, and then he befriended the prison warden. And then before he knew it, he was running the whole prison. And because he only focused on what he could control, by the time that he got out of prison, he was running the whole nation because he only focused on what he could control. So it's like this opposite paradoxical truth. It's like the more you focus on the things you can control, the actual more influence you'll have in the world and the more power you'll have to create your own reality. Not saying that other stuff is going to come in, but you'll actually have that ability. But I think it's sometimes people can forget that easily just because being bombarded with information.
Right. I love the idea of focus on what you can control. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of mental health implications for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's going to help with that too, just to add to what you were saying there, Jared, detach from the outcomes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you can detach from the outcome, and I don't mean that it doesn't matter what you're trying to create or build. It matters a lot. Work toward your goal. But when I say detach from the outcomes, let's see if we can separate ourselves from that thinking of I'll be happy when.
Right.
Or in order for me to feel okay, I need to do this or that. And in fact, going back to Sekizan-san's question here, how to change my bad behaviors in a short window of time.
Yeah.
Detach from the outcome. Let yourself get familiar with the idea of I'm okay with or without that.
Yeah. Yeah. Embrace the shadow.
And once you're in that position, you're more likely to be able to simply opt out of whatever that behavior is. I have to stop smoking in order to be happy. No, you don't. You can be happy smoking. You probably won't live as long.
Right.
It's a legitimate choice. Well, if it's simply a choice and you can be happy either way, it's easier to choose it.
Yeah.
Or opt out. That's a paradox, Jared, but I think it's really powerful.
Absolutely. And I think most profound truths are paradoxical in nature. And that's what makes them powerful. It hits both sides of the spectrum. Dr. Paul, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time out to answer the questions and share your own experiences and wisdom. What programs are you doing? What do you have coming up?
The one that I just mentioned is one that you might be interested in. PositivityWebClass.com. PositivityWebClass.com. It's a gift. I'm just doing this for anyone who would like to have some additional tools. I'm going into my positivity training in this web class. It's about an hour long, completely free of charge. So come join us. You mentioned building a practice earlier. I did a webinar on building a life coaching practice as well, and that's lifecoachwebclass.com.
Beautiful.
So there's a couple of things that I'm offering.
Cool.
If you want to come and play, I'm happy to talk to you.
Beautiful. Guys, thanks so much for everyone being here. Check out the links in the description box below. We got a lot of resources there. I invite you to check them out. Get whatever you need to move through your space and create life on your terms. Dr. Paul, thanks again. It's really been a pleasure and honor. Thank you so much.